You know, a really powerful warning is starting to echo from some of the world's biggest stages. And it's not just about politics as usual, it's being framed as a full-blown diagnosis of where the West is right now and a pretty radical prescription for its future. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack this new populist playbook that's seriously aiming to reshape our world. And it all kind of kicks off with this incredibly stark declaration. Back in 2024, Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, stood up in front of a global audience and just delivered this brutally blunt assessment. This wasn't just another political speech, you know? It was positioned as an urgent alarm bell for the entire future of Western civilization. To really get what this warning is all about, we have to go to Davos. Yeah, the World Economic Forum, a place that's pretty much synonymous with the global establishment. And right there, an ideological bombshell was dropped. The argument that the very foundations of the West are at risk. And look, this wasn't just some one-off comment. The rhetoric has been seriously escalating. If you look at the timeline, you can see this progression. It goes from a simple warning of danger to identifying, quote, mental parasites, and then finally declaring a full-blown global awakening. It's a narrative that's clearly growing in confidence. Okay, so if the West is in danger, what exactly is the threat? Well, according to this argument, the enemy isn't another country. It's an ideology, and it's one that's been given a very, very potent name. The absolute root of the problem, as is defined in this worldview, is that the West has basically turned its back on its own principles. The accusation is that it's embraced this insidious form of socialism. The term they use for this specific brand of socialism is wokeism, and you really have to pay attention to the language here. It's not being framed as just a political disagreement. No, it's described as a disease, a mental virus, a great epidemic, and even a cancer that needs to be, and I'm quoting, excised. It's not about debate, it's about removal. And a core idea that's under attack here is the concept of social justice. The argument being made is that far from being a force for good, it's actually, quote, inherently unfair because it's violent, and that it ultimately eats away at a society's well-being. So this brings us to what's presented as the core ideological battle. On one side, you've got individualism, which is framed as the engine of capitalism and prosperity. And on the other, you have collectivism, a philosophy that, in this view, might sound nice and altruistic, but is seen as the direct highway to the dangers of so-called social justice. Okay, so that's the big idea. But how does this abstract ideology actually translate into policy? This is where the philosophy smacks into the real world, through this highly transactional America First worldview, which is, of course, most famously articulated by people like Donald Trump. Well, if you follow that train of thought, if individualism is everything and collectivism is the enemy, then international relations can't really be about abstract alliances or the collective good. They have to be about clear, tangible benefits for your nation. Every single deal, every treaty has to have a direct, measurable payoff. And they're not shy about pointing to specific examples. Canada is accused of getting a lot of freebies. Decades and decades of investment in NATO, that's framed as getting the US absolutely nothing in return. This whole approach really redefines alliances, not as partnerships, but as just bad business deals. The core feeling here is one of imbalance. It's this perception that the United States has just been giving and giving and giving, while its allies have only been taking. The stated goal is pretty simple: reverse the direction of that one-way street. But it's not just about ideology and policy. There's a third, absolutely crucial element here: style. So this section zeroes in on that confrontational, very personal, and often mocking approach that's become a real hallmark of this political movement. So let's head back to Davos one more time, because this is where policy really meets personality. The source material highlights this really tense and pretty memorable moment between two world leaders that just perfectly illustrates this confrontational style. So here's the moment. Donald Trump on a global stage, publicly commenting on French President Emmanuel Macron's sunglasses. It's this personal, mocking jab that just completely punctures the normally formal atmosphere of international diplomacy. And you can bet the fallout was immediate. The official reason for the sunglasses was medical, something about a burst blood vessel. But that didn't stop online rumors from flying. For supporters, though, it was framed as a show of strength. As one commentator put it, Trump was showing he wouldn't be bullied, not even by an ally. All right, let's pull back for a second and connect all these dots. Because this isn't just about a few isolated statements or policies. This final part of our explainer looks at how all these different elements are being woven together into the narrative of a global movement. So there you have it, the three-part playbook in focus. A really sharp ideological critique of wokeism, a ruthlessly transactional foreign policy, and a highly confrontational personal style. And together, these are being presented as the key ingredients of a worldwide political shift. And all of this points toward the ultimate vision. See, the goal isn't just to change one country's policies. It's a call for the Americas to lead a global counter-revolution, a rebirth of liberty that aims to, in Milei's words, once again illuminate the entire West. And the path to get there is laid out in three pretty clear steps. First, you have to acknowledge the threat of so-called woke socialism. Second, you have to actively champion the ideas of liberty. And third, you have to repay what's called a civilizational debt to the foundations of Western culture. Which really leaves us all with a final massive question. As this playbook, this combination of ideology, policy, and style, spreads across the world, what is it ultimately building? Is it the foundation for a new, unified global movement, or is it sowing the seeds of a new global conflict? That's definitely something to think about.